guys, and welcome back to Pop Culture Addicts. I am Tim. I am your host, and this is a reminder that you are watching and or listening to a show that is made by a nerd for all you nerds. So I hope you guys are enjoying this string of interviews we have for you. Now, our guest today is one of the best voices in rock and roll, and I will fight you for that. He is. He's got an amazing voice, and it's always been what's drawn me to his band. Now, we were all introduced to him in his band Candlebox in the summer of 1993. Since then, Candlebox has released some of the most recognizable music on their seven subsequent studio albums. That's a lot of S's in one sentence, and that's why I just screwed all that up. But so they've got all the studio albums, and then he's got some other great musical projects, which if you're not paying attention to, you should be, like The Gracious Few. And I'm sure I'm going to say this one wrong, Le Projet. And then there's also one of my favorites, his solo album with the HiWatts, which I'm still desperately looking for on vinyl, but that's another story for another time. So in our chat tonight, we're going to discuss his origin story, retirement from music, and his return. We're also going to talk about songwriting process and a few other things. Now, if you're new here, this is your reminder to go ahead and click that like and follow button, because I don't want you to miss out on future interviews with some other great guests. So at this time, I'd like to welcome Kevin Martin of the band Candlebox to Pop Culture Addicts. Welcome to the show, Kevin.
Hey, man, how are you? Nice to see you.
Good. Hey, so you have, so I'm just going to get my fanboying out of the way. So right off the top, because you have legitimately been one of my favorite artists of all time. Candlebox has had such a special place for me, my brother-in-law. We're looking forward to seeing you. You're coming to Grand Rapids, Michigan on July 17th. My brother-in-law and I are coming. That's one of the things that I think he introduced me to you guys. And he's like, hey, have you heard of this band yet? I was like, no, who are they? And then I've been a fan ever since. So seen you a couple times live, back at the Machine Shop back in the days, back in Flint, Michigan, and, a couple other spots. But so I'm really excited to have you on the show. I've got my fanboying out of the way. I can breathe normal now, and we'll ask some questions.
Take a breath. Take a deep breath.
All right. I can do this. All right. So the very first question, Kevin, I love to ask everybody who's ever been on the show is about their origin story, in fact. And I do this for a couple of reasons. Number one, I like to know what makes people tick, why they do what they do, why they're interested in the career that they're involved in. And then secondly, as you may have heard in the intro, I'm kind of a nerd. And as a nerd, we love a good origin story. So in the origin story of Kevin Martin, what got you to the point where you said, I want to be a musician?
Well, I think that any musician will tell you the same thing. Generally, music is what got me to be a musician. But for me, really, it was, I grew up in a household that was surrounded by music. My father was a jazz musician. My mother was a singer. She did the standards. She also sang in the Chicago Philharmonic. She, a bunch of stuff. My parents were married in 1959. And my sister was born in 61. My brother Dennis was born in 62. My brother Brian was born in 67. I was born in 69. And from day one of my recollection of being able to recognize music, it's always been there for me. My father was always playing jazz. He played a lot of classical music in the house. We had, a turntable and records and things like that. My mother was big into opera and pop music. She loved ABBA. She loved gospel. She loved R&B. I remember the very first time I heard Otis Redding. My brain was like, what is that voice? That is the most incredible, beautiful voice I've ever heard. So it's always been there for me. I think when I decided that I wanted to actually make a living at it, I was about 10 years old. My brother Dennis had turned me on to Black Sabbath and Rush. My sister had turned me on to the Cars, the Clash, Pink Floyd, what's his name? Alan Parsons, which is that's a crazy thing to say, but she turned me on to like this really kind of eclectic mix of music. And then my brother Brian was all into Kiss and that sort of thing. So I think it was right around the age of 10 when I started playing drums in my school band. that I realized that it was something that I wanted to do for a living. I didn't know if I was going to be able to, but I knew that, my dad had a job, my mom had a job, my sister was working, and why shouldn't I be able to do something like this? Not knowing that it was, going to be one of the most difficult things in the world. And then, of course, moving to Seattle when I was 14 years old, being surrounded by great talent in that city, and seeing some of the most amazing concerts of my life at the ripe old age of 14, kind of solidified it for me. And then I went to see the Cult on the Love Tour, and
Oh,
I was
nice.
absolutely floored by Ian Astbury and Billy Duffy's kind of ability to work this record that I had fallen in love with on such an enormous scale live. And it sounded like the record, and it was, that was back before you could use tracks or anything like that. So this was a band that was, you know, stripped down as a four piece, just delivering some of the most blistering rock and roll to my ears. That's when I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. But at the time, I was still a drummer in a band, so I was thinking that I was going to be a drummer in a punk band, and that was going to be my career. It wasn't until I was asked to come sing on some demos by Scott Mercado, who was the drummer in Candlebox, and this guy named Rick Vaughn, that I decided it was going to be a singer.
That's cool. Did you have any notion of being a singer before that? Like anybody would say, "Oh, hey, you got a good voice. You should try to be a singer."
Well, I sang in choir. I sang at parties. People, we'd all sing at parties and stuff, like, songs would come on the radio, whatnot.
Sure.
But it was never really. If you listen to that first album, I'm such a new singer to the craft. I did not really know what I was doing. I had no concept of how to sing rock songs. I had written those lyrics and I'd written those melodies, but to me they were so, kind of juvenile, and um, I don't know. I just was so new to it that I really had no idea what I was doing. And then, as the band's progressed, obviously over the years, I've learned how to use my voice and how to work with it, and
Okay.
understand what it's capable of. But yeah, I mean, I no one really ever told me that I should be a singer in a band back in the day.
Okay. That's kind of a cool background. Now historically, so on my natural father's side of the family, there is a ton of musical ability. It skipped me. I got the talking gene. Everybody else
Mhm.
got the musical gene. I got the talking gene, so I kind of stuck with that. But I have a lot of music around my life, and
Right.
so it's always been cool to me to hear people who are in their evolution as an artist, and I can see what you're saying about being a new singer now that you've mentioned that, because I did not know that about you before listening to the self-titled album all those years ago. To me, every time an album was put out, it was like, oh, these guys have been around for a long time, they're awesome. um
Yeah.
but so I've that's kind of a cool evolution in my mind now as I think about it. I can see that a little bit more. So you've got all these great influences. You've got family structure around you. You've got musicians around you, and those all helped your musical journey then. But let's look at modern influences, the things that propel you towards music now. What are some bands or artists that influence your musical direction, or are you more influenced from things outside of music?
Oh man, I'm influenced and inspired by so many different musicians. My Apple library is crazy. My Spotify playlists are kind of nutty. I love yacht rock. I love Steely Dan. I love the Clash. I'm inspired by the War
Hell
on
yeah.
Drugs. Rufus Del Sol. I'm a huge fan of. Love Tame Impala. The National is like one of my favorite bands. And then some of the contemporaries that I really like, in like the rock world, are kind of, I really love the last Chevelle record. I think that that band kind of, it continues to push the envelope musically. And I'm not a huge fan of the new kind of modern rock, or active rock, if you will. I find it all to be a bit vanilla, but I think there's something special about what Chevelle does. So I'm kind of really inspired by a lot of different things, but I really tend to pull honestly from kind of my classical library of stuff that I grew up with, the things that I loved. The music that inspired me as a teenager, that music inspired me as a a young 8, 9, 10-year-old kid. So I go backwards a lot to what I listen to, and I pull from that. Like when I start to sing a song in the studio, a lot of times I'll think to myself, how did Otis Redding approach this song? How would Matt, I don't even know how to say his last name, Benninger from the National approach this? I try to pull from what I'm inspired by to see if it can
Nice.
can really help me move through what it is musically, because I'm not taking a year to write a record anymore. I'm not taking 6 months to do pre-production. It's We go in the studio, we write the songs, and I start working on melodies immediately. I don't write lyrics prior to a record. I don't have a book full of lyrics. I've got ideas. I've got stuff that I've jotted down in my journal, but really I just kind of flip through that and let the song tell me what it wants me to do. And that's really how I wrote Far Behind and You as well. Those two songs,
Okay.
Barty brought the bass lines in when he tried out for the band, and I just kind of let the song tell me what it wanted. So that's really how I do things. So I'm a little bit maybe backwards than a lot of my contemporaries, but really the inspiration that is out there for me is everywhere. And I think Keith Richards said it. Songs are just floating around. If you reach out and grab them, they're right there for you. You just got to know what you're looking for, and and I know what I'm looking for when I'm working. I go back to those inspirations. I pull from that library I have, and it helps me to kind of work through those songs.
That's a great answer, and I love how you tie that into your musical library and the things that you've listened to over the years, and pulling from such great artists like Otis Redding and his amazing tone and how he would carry a vocal and those things. So that's really kind of cool for me. Um, and it also kind of touched on another question I had for you, which was about your process, because I asked that question of a lot of authors, and you being a
Mhm.
writer of lyrics, you are a writer, you are an author, you're an author of the song, you're still telling a story. So it's kind of cool to hear the process of how you do things, because I always ask writers, what do you, okay, so do you build the world first, or you build the characters first, or how do you do that? And it's kind of neat to know that you're in the writing community. I think you'd be called what's called a pantser. Uh,
Ah.
that means you're flying by the seat of your pants a little bit.
Always.
No, and that's cool. I love it that you have that level of creativity around you, that you're able to pull from that and be able to create. Whereas I would probably need an outline to be able to sit down and once I get an idea in my head. But I love the idea of pantsing. I just have never been able to, because I write articles for a website, and I've never been able to just go, okay, I'm going to write about this and sit down and do it. I have to think about it. I have to make notes. I got to put all these things together and then kind of have like a little outline for myself to follow to be able to get into the story.
Yeah.
But it sounds to me, and maybe you can correct me if I'm misgeneralizing this, that you tend to be more inspired on the spot
Yeah.
in what you're doing at the moment. Would that be correct?
Yeah, 100%. I think that really, once you key into once the song starts to speak to you, I'm not a linguist in any way, shape, or form. I've repeated words in my songs, over the past 35 years. But I'm such a personal writer that I think that people that know me and that understand, or that know Candlebox, kind of expect that from me. I'm not going to come to you with, I'm not going to throw the word Nostradamus in my songs, or incapacitated is not going to be in there. I'm very simple with it, but I think the thing about music, and for me, and especially Candlebox, is it's a kind of, we're a pretty simple band musically. I mean, there are moments that are that are challenging, and we have written some really brilliant songs, and I won't discount that. But I think on paper, Candlebox is very simple. Far Behind is 4 chords, but the story behind it and the melody behind it, again, was, I was a pantser. That was, I really had, the lyric was now, Andy, I didn't mean to treat you bad, but I did it anyway. And it was about Andrew Wood. The producer, Kelly, said, hey, don't be so literal. Use a different word. And I was like, okay, now maybe. And he's like, okay, that's great. And then I made up the lyrics really on the spot when we were tracking the song. I tracked the lyrics for that song at 3 in the morning at Robert Lang's studio in Seattle when we were doing the demo tape. So I came up with the second verse on the spot, and that whole vocal is two passes. So I
Oh
think
wow.
we comped the first chorus and the second chorus, but Kelly was so happy with how the vocals came out and the lyrics and everything that we just left it as is because we thought it was a demo, so we didn't really think we had to fix it. Ends up that that demo is the version of the song that was released, 36 years ago. So I mean, I guess I tapped into it and I still tap into it. So I guess to make a long story longer, yeah, I just really let the song tell me what it's looking for, and once that gives me that concept, it's very easy for me to run with it. And I've been running, my entire life towards something that is kind of attainable, and that is to be a musician and have a career for it and or a career with it, and I have been running towards that for since I was 10 years old, and I'm somehow still here. So I guess maybe I've done a few things correctly, and it works. I don't think people expect me, like I said, to be this kind of linguistic hero lyrically.
Right.
I don't write Pearl Jam songs. I don't write like Eddie Vedder. I don't like Chris Cornell. I write like Kevin Martin, and I think that that's what people have learned to accept from me, and I've learned to accept from me.
I don't see it as a simplicity. I see it as an honesty in the lyrics.
Oh,
It's
thank you.
just somebody sharing who and what they are. And I've thought that all along with your lyrics, that there's a nice honesty to it, where I think that anybody can sit down and listen to any one of your songs and relate to it in one way or another. And I think that that's a skill that not a lot of lyricists have when they sit down to write a song. Sometimes there's, well, without naming names, there's some high mindedness out there in the writing community of oh, look at me, and it's that takes away from, in my opinion anyway, and I'm just a guy in Michigan, but that takes away from the enjoyment of the song, where it's a little high minded. Instead, where there's an honesty to it, it's more welcoming and inclusive, I think.
Right on.
So, all right. So let me ask you this question, because now I'm curious about, you've talked about your levels of inspiration. So now I'm a little curious about this. What is the most unlikely source that you've ever garnered inspiration from that has become a song?
I'm like, well, there's a best friends about Barty's dog. He bought this German Shepherd pup when we were making the Lucy record, and we used to come to the studio and shit in the studio. So that's why at the beginning of the song I was like, "Hey, come on, Chevy." But yeah, there's a tons of things, man. The song "The Bridge" from Disappearing Airports is about the documentary "The Bridge,"
Okay.
which is about the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco and people that jump off of it and try to commit suicide and stuff. So that was an unlikely, source of inspiration, which it's incredibly heartbreaking documentary. Um, but I kind of tend to pull from a lot of things. Lighting a cigarette, I've written songs about that. Fires in the hills, my relationship with my father, the challenge of having a martyr for a mother. It's there's a lot of things that have inspired me over my life. Yard work. I don't know if you can hear the guy cutting the tree back there, but I've written songs about mowing grass. So and I'll let you figure out which one that is. But like Supernova. That's a song really about kind of the energy of sexuality
Okay.
and what it can do to you. Crazy is a song it's about relationships and the difficulty of them, and every facet. Being in love is not an easy thing. Being married to a strong woman is not an easy thing. Having a teenage
Mhm.
son is not an easy thing. So that's really kind of, always what I pull from. It's really, I'm so kind of personal, like you said, lyrically, about what I do and what I write about, and it's really just how I've been affected in my life. But yeah, the most random things are, the dog, and a documentary called The Bridge, and mowing a lawn and stuff like that. Yeah, it doesn't really, it's, I guess, maybe the when I was mowing a lawn, I was mowing Chad Taylor's lawn. You'd mentioned the Gracious Few. When I grew up, I used to mow lawns when I was a kid to make money in the summers. And when I was writing that record with the guys in the Gracious Few, I was staying at Chad's house in Lancaster, and I was like, "Dude, would you mind if I mowed your grass?" And he's like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" And I was like, I haven't mowed a lawn literally in like 40 years, and it's something that I always loved doing. And my wife would tell you, my son would tell you, I'm always fucking around in my house doing something. But mowing lawns is something that I really loved. And he's like, "Yeah, man, fucking go ahead." And I put patterns in the grass. And he was like, "Are you fucking serious?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's what I used to do when I was a kid too." I mean, it's like that inspired me to write stuff on the Gracious Few record. So yeah, that's kind of how I work.
I love that. I I'm not gonna lie, my mind's a little blown by the song "Best Friend" now. I got to go back and re-listen to that a little differently, but
Yeah.
uh, yeah, that's a cool background story. I dig that. All right, this is for our listeners. If you're enjoying what you're hearing, don't forget to click that like and follow button. All right, so Kevin, you've also outside of Candlebox, we talked about the Gracious Few just now. I absolutely adore Kevin Martin and the HiWatts album. That is
Thank you.
so damn good. Just
Thank you.
seriously, that's not me fanboying. That's me saying what a good album is. And then there was something that I was not aware of until I was starting to do research for you. Le Projet, I think it's pronounced.
Le Projet.
Le Projet. Okay. And now these has all been done in between different Candlebox releases. So it's a two-part question here. How does these working on these other projects fuel your desire for music creation inside of Candlebox? And are there any other side projects of yours that I'm missing out on?
Wow. Well, yeah, I've got a side project called Future Trash with my producer friend Don Miggs. Don produced our last Candlebox record, The Long Goodbye.
Okay.
That's a record that I think is going to be coming out next year. Yeah, I mean, if God, do I have other projects? Um, I mean, I'm always doing something. I don't know. I think yes, working with the Gracious Few certainly fueled a lot of the energy of disappearing airports, because it was. I love the aggressive nature of the Gracious Few record, but I also loved and that's the first time actually lyrically I've ever collaborated on an album, because I knew that I knew that Chad Patrick and Chad Gracie, um, were going through some stuff with their breakup with Ed, and I knew
Yes.
they had things that they wanted to talk about, and things that they wanted to say. And as a matter of fact, I think Ed even mentioned to a friend of mine once, he's like, "Man, after I heard that record, I didn't think I was ever going to be able to work with the guys in the Gracious Few ever again," because he said I could really feel, how much pain and anger they had towards me. And really just that happens a lot in bands, when they split up and
Sure.
stuff, you kind of go through this, experiencing heartbreak or frustration. And but yeah, those guys, they really kind of helped write those lyrics. And I was like, "What do you want to say here? What are you feeling?" So the aggressiveness of that record and the sensitivity of it, like the song like Crying Time and whatnot,
Yeah.
really inspired a lot of the emotion of the disappearing airports, because that was the first time I was making a Candlebox record without Pete. And I was going through the emotions of, am I going to be able to pull this off? Are people going to care? Is it going to be good? Is my band worthy? Am I worthy of releasing a record like this without Pete under the name Candlebox? So all of that stuff, it was fueled by the breakup of Live and the Gracious Few record. Le Projet was first off started out just as a tribute. I had gotten together with Morgan and this kid named Lenny, and then the bass player is the guy from uh, Black Label Society.
Okay.
JD is his name, or I can't remember how I don't even know his name, but he plays with Zach Wild.
Yeah.
And then this kid named Nick. And they wanted to do a tribute for the Hurricane Sandy folks because a lot of those guys live on the East Coast and they were affected by the hurricane. So they asked me to come and sing on it. So we wrote that song called The Pride, which we released, and it raised money for the Hurricane Sandy victims. And then Morgan's like, let's make a record. Nick left, and Brian Quinn, who joined Candlebox, ended up doing a couple of songs on the Le Projet record. And then Adam Curry, who was my bass player in Candlebox, JD wasn't able to do the record, so Adam joined us. So we have like 5 or 6 other songs from that, which that really kind of helped to inspire a lot of the writing that Adam and I did for Wolves,
Okay.
because it was a more aggressive record, and we kind of pulled from that movement. Because Morgan is a I don't know if people know, as a drummer he's brilliant, but as a songwriter he's incredible, and he's not afraid to pick up an instrument and play it and learn how to play it. So Morgan inspired a lot of stuff on the Le Projet shit, which we ended up turning into inspiration for the Candlebox record, Wolves. So it all kind of, it all kind of melds together. It's a big pot of jambalaya, if you will, for me.
Yeah.
But again, like, I pull from that library of mine when I'm working on stuff and say this feels right for that. So um, it's all kind of it's all kind of there for me. Kevin Martin and the HiWatts was, my opportunity to kind of branch off from Candlebox after we had split up. My deal with Maverick was done. Gold Circle Records had signed me
Right.
based on a couple showcases that I did, and I had written those songs with some really good friends. I wrote 2 songs with Eric Erlandson from Hull. I wrote
Okay.
four songs with this kid named Robbie Allen, who had been a touring guitar player with Candlebox in '98, and he had a band called Rob Rule that opened up for us. And Robbie's a good friend and a great songwriter, so it was a real collaborative album for me. And I was so grateful to be able to have Kelly Gray produce it, and Dave Hillis, who had worked on obviously the first Candlebox record and the second Candlebox record. So I kind of went back to the relationships that I'd known and experienced, and the band was fantastic. I had Dean Butterworth on drums. Dean was, of course, from Ben Harper and the Innocent Criminals, and
Oh,
he
cool.
joined me, and then left Kevin Martin the Highwatts to join Morrissey, and then left Morrissey to go to Good Charlotte. So I had these brilliant musicians playing with me on these songs that I was really attached to, and that, I think, is a record that I haven't gone back to for inspiration, mainly because I just want to leave that record alone. I have a second one that I have like 30 songs for. I've just not kind of wrapped my head around getting into the studio and doing another HiWatts record, but I get asked that question all the time. And the stuff that I have that's waiting there for me is really good. I just need to figure out if I want to go that route again.
That's fair. And for fans of the first Hiwatts album, yes, please. You know, and I say that in all honesty. That's that to me. Somebody once asked me, like, well, yeah, and I hope you don't take this the wrong way, and because I mean it with the best of intentions. When somebody asked me, they said, well, how do you describe that album? Because it's, I'm like, it's the Lost Candlebox album. That's what I've always tell people.
Oh man, thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've had a lot of people tell me that.
yeah, it's just it's so much of what I associate Candlebox it being is because of you, your voice, your lyrics, the sound. It's just, and that's all there, and it's very much a tell of your heart and your desire to write music was there, and it's just such a good album. So
Thank you.
if you have 30 more tracks, just send them over. I'll tell you if they're good or not. It's fine. No, but yeah,
Yeah,
just can't for Candlebox and HiWatts fans everywhere. That's a treasure trove we would look forward to whenever you get around to doing that. So
thanks, man. I get in the studio and make that record at some point.
All right, cool. All right, so in 2023, you backed off. You took the the old foot off the gas pedal. Went into a retirement for a while, and that retirement lasted 3 years. You came back like Jordan, wearing the 4 or 5. So um, you're out touring again. You got albums out. You're doing more, and like I mentioned earlier, my brother-in-law Seth and I cannot wait to see you guys in Grand Rapids on July 17th. We got our tickets. We're excited to come. But what convinced you to come back and do this all over again?
It really had everything to do with Pete coming back. He had filled in for a couple shows when we were out with Three Doors Down. Brian had to go home for actually both occasions had to go home for weddings. He's a Philly kid and he's got a big family, so he's like, "Hey man, I've got my cousin's getting married on this day," and how those Philly people are. It's like especially when they're Irish and Italian, they got to be there. They're cut out of the family. So
Yeah.
Pete filled in. Yeah, Pete filled in for 4 shows on that Three Doors Down tour, and then he filled in for 4 shows on the Bush Run with Jerry Cantrell, and we had a great time. And he contacted me shortly afterwards and said, "Hey man, I'm really itching to get back." And he's like, "I know you're retiring. Do you have a little bit more time in you?" And I was like, "Well, let's do a couple dates and see what happens." And so we did some of those spring dates last year, and things went really, really well. And it just seemed to kind of click. And of course, the minute you'd say that you're not going to do anything, every single promoter in the country calls you and says, "Hey, I've got these dates for you." So, we kind of, we just, let's see what happens. And they went great. And it's really, you know, I love my band, and I love Brian Quinn, and I love Island Styles, and I love how they play as guitar players. But Pete's got fingers unlike anybody else that I've ever had the pleasure of playing with musically. And there's something when he picks up the guitar and starts playing those songs, I immediately know how to sing them again, sing them absolutely correctly, because for years I haven't been singing them right. And I go right back into that 24-year-old kid playing music on tour with Rush when I'm jamming with Pete on stage, and it inspired me to want to continue to create. So we're working on a new record now. We've got like 8 ideas. We're going to go in the studio in August, and my buddy's got a studio in Palm Springs, Matt Sorum. So we're going to go to Palm
Oh,
Springs
nice.
and track 3 songs that we're working on, and hopefully get those out by the end of the year, and then maybe a record next year. I don't really want to release a record because I think it's a waste of time now and a waste of money. So hopefully we can just keep putting songs out and keep touring on them. And if people like what they hear, and we'll start playing them in the set, and who knows, we'll see what goes from there. But really, it has everything to do with Pete coming back, man. That's kind of why my retirement stopped. And also my wife is like, "Look, yeah, I don't think you're ready to be home yet because you're driving me crazy." So uh, happy wife, happy life for sure.
Well, tell your wife we all said thank you. Um, that's awesome. All right. So you have, reading through the history of Candlebox with the deal with Maverick and everything, you have been through a little bit of everything in your musical career. Looking back on it, what's the best piece of advice that you feel is important for young musicians coming up to know?
Oh man, trust your instincts, trust your heart, um, be yourself. Don't try to be anybody else. Make the music you want to make. Don't let anybody tell you that you've got to do something a certain way. Um, it is entirely your choice, and your right to make that music. Get out and play as often as possible. Play shows everywhere. There's a young band I produced this year called the Hounds, which these are high school kids, and unfortunately, they're all graduating and going off to different colleges. But I've said to them a million times, just keep in touch with one another, send music to one another. You can record this stuff in your dorm room. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You're too good of a band to not be making music. So really, it's just about commitment, but you really have to. If you're not honest with yourself and you're trying to create, if you're trying to be the next Nickelback or the next Alter Bridge or the next Turnstile or um, what's that band? The drummer wears a mask, and I can't remember what they're called. but everybody's all up in love with them. But they're one of a kind. I mean, it's if you're trying to do that, you're trying to be that. We have enough of those, and it's not.
Right.
You might get an opportunity to make a record, and it might sell, but it doesn't. It's not going to be long standing unless you're really committed to that, and it's exactly what you're supposed to do. And I find that we've got so much vanilla ice cream out there right now in the rock and roll world. I've said it a million times. Where's the Neapolitan? Where's the
Yeah.
pistachio, and where's the good stuff? That actually makes you go, oh, that's really good. Vanilla bean is vanilla bean, and there's only so many vanillas you can make until it's still vanilla. But
True.
um, I just think that you really got to be honest with yourself. You got to be honest about the creativity and nature of it, and the music that you're making.
All right, very cool. All right, well, Kevin, you've answered all my questions thus far very admirably. You've done well, but it's time to ask you it's time
Thank you
to
so
ask you a
much.
silly question. Absolutely, yeah. Time to ask you a silly question. Now, it's really not all that silly, but this comes about because my live show co-host, her name is Kathleen. Her and her husband John have a daughter, and they were out and about with their daughter walking around town. Somebody asked her daughter this question, but not Kathleen. And Kathleen, being the little sister that I never wanted, um, but it's not my little sister. It's a weird thing. Anyway, yeah. So she got instantly offended and was like, "Well, that's rude. You should never age out of that question." And so that question, Kevin Martin, is, "What's your favorite dinosaur?"
Oh my God. Um, that's a good question. Man, I've always, since I can remember, Stegosaurus has always just seemed like a badass to me.
Sure.
And I am an Aries, so there's a bit of the ram in me that I think is probably why I like that about him. Just make your way through shit and don't worry about it, sort of thing. Um, but I mean, I love a T-Rex too. I've got friends that have T-Rex arms every time we go to dinner. So maybe I should say the T-Rex can't quite reach the wallet.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah. I call those my kids, but hey, whatever.
Yeah, my kid too. He's like, God, New York's
So.
gonna be amazing. I'm like, you're on a budget, buddy. Yeah. So Stegosaurus. Let's go with Stegosaurus.
All right, man. I dig that. All right. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for being on Pop Culture Addicts today. Where can my listeners and viewers go to find out more about you, your work, your tour dates, anything you've got coming up?
It's funny. I think it's the day of anonymity for Candlebox is long gone, and as much as I hate social media, it is the only way you can reach a band anymore. So we're on everything. If you write to us on Instagram, that's me that's responding to you. If you write to us on Facebook, that's me that's responding to you. I never get on Facebook, so I don't really respond much on there. But yeah, I mean, that's Facebook, Instagram, the worldwide interwebs. Spotify's a great place. We've got a lot of stuff going
Nice.
on Spotify. TikTok is we're upping our game with TikTok, because I think it's as much as I find it insulting. It's a great place to find great music, and it's a great place to reach an enormous audience. And in
Yeah.
this day and age, when you're a band that's been doing this for 35 years, you got to find new outlets. So, all those socials, man, we're there. We respond. I respond. And podcasts, man. These are great places. Candlebox has done a million podcasts. I've done a million podcasts, and I enjoy them. So just search Candlebox in your favorite podcast, and I think we pop up on most of them.
All right. Very cool. Well, I'll make sure that we get some links down in our show notes down below so people can check you out on your socials and your tour
Yeah,
dates
we'll
and all
share
that
it too.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Very cool. But yeah, we'll get those out there. All right, guys. So thank you for watching and or listening. Be sure to follow Kevin and Candlebox on all their socials. We'll have some links down below for you guys to be able to check that out. Now, if you've enjoyed what you heard today, don't forget to click that like and follow button. And if you, like us, are a pop culture addict, please consider leaving a review on your favorite podcast listening platform, or even just a comment here on our YouTube channel. That helps out tremendously. So, on behalf of Candle Martin, ooh boy, there's a third one for us. On behalf of Kevin Martin of Candlebox, thank you for listening and or watching. And until next time, may the force be with you as you live long and prosper. Goodbye.
Nice.
Reference to any specific product or entity mentioned on this podcast does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by Pop Culture Addicts. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. If you have questions about this disclaimer, please contact us via email at info@pcapod.com.